The story of Jeffrey Dahmer begins in Milwaukee. His childhood was difficult, and soon after, an unimaginable sequence of terrible deeds began. Driven by dark thoughts, he left behind a disturbing trail of violence and cruelty. It's a story that pushes the boundaries of imagination and allows us to glimpse into the depths of the human psyche. Jeffrey Dahmer's story began on the streets of Milwaukee, marked by a tough upbringing. When his parents separated, he immersed himself in dark thoughts. Even as a young boy, he roamed in the woods, entangled in a world filled with peculiar things. Over time, he felt an attraction towards men, yet disturbing thoughts accompanied him. In school, he often turned to alcohol and drugs. University wasn't a solution, and even the military didn't bring peace to his life. That was just the beginning of his dark journey. An unpredictable path that lay like a shadow on his way. Jeffrey found himself on an uncertain and challenging path, inevitably leading into darkness. The challenges of his life started early and unfolded into a shadowy path that led him into the darkest chapters of criminal history. In 1978, the then 18-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer invited fellow teenager Stephen Mark Hicks to his home. The evening started innocently but quickly took a darker turn. When Hicks talked about girls, Dahmer felt uncomfortable, realizing he had no chance with Hicks. As Hicks prepared to leave for a concert, Dahmer lost control. Becoming aggressive, Dahmer grabbed a dumbbell, struck Hicks, rendering him unconscious, and eventually strangled him. The evening, which began as an invitation, concluded in a cruel act of violence. The tragic fate of Hicks marked the fateful start of Dahmer's dark journey into the depths of serial murder. It was late November 1987 when Dahmer visited Club 219 in Milwaukee and met Stephen Tormey there. The night initially seemed quite normal. They drank rum and engaged in consensual sex. However, when Dahmer woke up the next morning, he discovered Tormey's lifeless body next to him. Confused and marked by injuries on his own arms and hands, he realized that he must have killed his companion. He hid the body in the basement before dismembering and disposing of it. After this incident, Dahmer could no longer resist. His fantasies drove him to actively seek out victims. Just 1 year later, Dahmer met 14-year-old James Dockstater, who was known to the police as a hustler. Dahmer offered him $50 for one night. After having sex, Dahmer drugged and strangled the young man and spent days eating his body. When the smell of decay became so strong that his grandmother noticed it, he blamed it on the litter box and disposed of the body in the same way as his previous victim. In the same way, Dahmer lured 23-year-old Richard Guerrero into his grandmother's house, strangled him and acted out his sexual fantasies on the corpse. There were also repeated charges against Dahmer, including an incident of loss of consciousness in 1988 after a meeting with a man he remained free. That same year, he lured a 13-year-old boy into his apartment for photos, but the boy fled when Dahmer touched him indecently and called the police. Dahmer was convicted of sexual assault, given probation, and worked in a chocolate factory until his imprisonment. But 2 months before he was due to serve his sentence, Dahmer met Anthony Sears, a 24-year-old half African American, in the gay bar La Cage. The two drove to West Allis, had sex, and then Dahmer drugged Sears with sleeping pills, killed him, abused the body and dismembered it in his bathtub. This was his 5th murder in 11 years, and there were more to come. Dahmer was also out and about in bars during open prison. In November 1989, he got drunk until he lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, he was tied up in the apartment of a stranger who had apparently raped him. The next morning, however, the man let him go and Dahmer returned to the reformatory. Around 2 weeks after his rape, Dahmer had the idea of writing a letter to the judge to express his remorse for his crime against the 13-year-old boy for which he had been arrested, and to ask for early release from prison. This letter actually had the desired effect, and Dahmer's imprisonment was ordered to end on March 2, 1990. There were thus 9 months and 7 days between the start and end of his sentence. As a condition of probation, he had to attend regular group therapy sessions and meetings with his probation officer. When Dahmer moved into apartment 213 in the Oxford apartment complex on North 25th Street in Milwaukee in May 1990, which cost only $300 warm. There, the murders escalated. Just a week after his release, Dahmer lured Raymond Smith to his apartment with $50. There he gave him sleeping pills and carried out his well-known ritual by strangling him and then taking photos in various poses. A week later, he lured Edward Smith to his apartment, strangled him and froze the remains in his freezer. 3 months later, he lured Ernest Miller into his apartment with $50, whom he met outside a bookstore. As he did not pass out with 2 sleeping pills, he decided on the gentlest alternative method he could think of and took a knife and cut Miller's throat with it. He put some parts of him in the fridge to eat afterwards. His next victim was 22-year-old David Thomas, with whom he also carried out his usual ritual. However, he did not find him attractive and therefore did not keep any of his remains. He lured Curtis Strotter by offering him money for nude photos. Dahmer also killed him. On April 7, 1991, he met Errol Lindsay as he was on his way to the locksmith. Dahmer believed in his sick imagination that he could turn him into a zombie by pouring hydrochloric acid through a hole in his skull. During this process, Lindsay suddenly woke up, whereupon Dahmer stunned him again and killed him by strangling him. Despite the fact that the neighbors kept complaining about the smells or the sound of a chainsaw, he never caught on with excuses such as his freezer being broken. On May 26, 1991, Dahmer met 14-year-old Konorak Synthesomphan at the Grand Avenue Mall and offered him money for photos. He also tried to turn him into a zombie with hydrochloric acid. When the boy was unconscious, Dahmer went to a bar to get drunk. When he went home in the early hours of the morning, he discovered Konorak naked and bleeding on a sidewalk, who had regained consciousness and left the apartment. Dahmer said that Konorak had had too much to drink and had run off in an argument. The officers escorted Dahmer and Konorak back to his apartment, where Dahmer provided the officers with underwear photos of their relationship. The officers then left without discovering Tony Hughes' body in the next room. Shortly afterwards, Dahmer killed the teenager. He found his next two victims, Matt Turner and Jeremiah Weinberger, in Chicago. Both accepted his invitation to Milwaukee, where he killed them in his apartment and photographed the dismemberment of their bodies. On July 15, 1991, he killed the 24-year-old African-American Oliver Lacey, whom he dismembered and then put his head in the refrigerator. His 17th and last victim was Joseph Bradehoft. Dahmer slept next to the corpse for days until maggots began to gather in his bed. At the same time, he cooled two more corpses with ice in his shower tray, as the decomposition progressed faster than the disposal of the bodies. On the afternoon of July 22, 1991, according to witness reports, Dahmer approached several men and offered them money for photos. 32-year-old Tracy Edwards accepted the offer and accompanied Dahmer to his apartment. To Edwards, Dahmer seemed normal and friendly at first. While Edwards and Dahmer were drinking alcohol and talking, Dahmer suddenly became threatening and handcuffed him and pulled out a knife. To appease Dahmer, Edwards took off his shirt and let him listen to his heartbeat. When they then watched a video of The Exorcist III, Dahmer fell into a trance-like, absent-minded state. Edwards took advantage of Dahmer's inattention and fled the apartment. Handcuffed, Edwards stopped a police patrol around 11:30 p.m. and explained that a freak had threatened him with a knife. Dahmer then willingly let the officers into his apartment. When they found the knife under the bed, they arrested Dahmer. When they continued to look around the apartment and discovered Lacey's head in the refrigerator, they called for backup. Shortly afterward, Dahmer was taken to Milwaukee Police Headquarters. After Dahmer was convicted in July 1991 of 16 of the 17 murders, he confessed to committing against young men and teenagers between 1978 and 1991. He was sentenced to the maximum possible sentence of 15 consecutive life sentences with no chance of release. On the morning of November 28, 1994, Dahmer and fellow inmates Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver were assigned to clean the bathroom facilities next to the gym. When the prison guards left the three inmates unattended for a few minutes, Scarver struck Dahmer and then Anderson with the iron bar of a dumbbell. Overall, the story of Jeffrey Dahmer is characterized by a terrifying sequence of crimes and unimaginable acts. His actions, characterized by manipulation, violence, and cruelty, have left deep scars on society. Dahmer's dark and disturbing story remains a tragic chapter in criminal history, a constant reminder of the importance of recognizing violence and mental health issues early and responding appropriately. May the memory of the victims always take center stage and move us to prevent such tragedies. That's it for the video about Jeffrey Dahmer's documentary. Please leave a like and subscription to support me on my way to the first 1,000 subscribers for free. Thanks for watching and see you next time.